Phenomenal are their portraits. They are inspiring, captivating, and uplifting. These images bring women we have never heard of before to life. Changing the ideal of what we see is possible in the area of science. They are strong, brave, courageous, and among the finest in their fields. Their stories needed to be told, so here we are cherry-picking a few of our best and brightest. Giving a glimpse into the past, present, and future in Who Said You Can't? African American Women in Science. Dr. Cordel Parris is truly living the American dream. Hard work and diligence has brought her to this place, and here she stands, surviving and succeeding in the American dream.
You know, I came here with very humble beginnings. I was here as an immigrant, lived in a homeless shelter, and here I am, the only Afro-American cardiologist in Louisiana right now that owns her own practice. So I feel very proud that this process has been very extensive, very educational, and survival. In Trinidad, I actually had the opportunity to see, have a microscope that my father brought back from United States, actually. And I started to look at blood samples and insects, with a microscope. And my neighbor, Miss Mabel, actually, she had a stroke, and my brother and myself actually took care of her for several years. I was probably about 7 to 9, I don't exactly remember. And she had a stroke. She was unable to speak. She was unable to move a portion of her body, and I didn't really understand what that was. And that was the beginning of all the feelings of what this is and how to cure this and how to fix this. It's kind of extensive. I'm from Trinidad, so I actually graduated a little bit earlier. I graduated from high school at about 15 and a half. I repeated high school here just because of the issues, with immigration in Erasmus Hall High School, then Brooklyn College, transferred to State University of New York, Brooklyn, medical school, Hahnemann University, Drexel, and then to upstate New York, Albany Medical College, and then to Marsh University, Joan C. Edwards in West Virginia. Very long and extensive. That's for cardiology fellowship, and the other one for internal medicine. In medical school, Drexel Hahnemann in Philadelphia, we had only 10 Afro-Americans in the whole program. They actually recruited me from college, from State University of New York. Somebody actually came from Hahnemann and tried to ask all the Afro-Americans who were in sciences. So I was recruited as that program, and I actually received a scholarship as part of that program. In that program, we had 10, and 9 of us were female. There was 1 male. From the 10, 2 or 3 of them were unsuccessful to graduation. The 1 male actually had to repeat one of his years. So I think when I graduated, probably there was about 6 of us that graduated out of a class of 184. There's so many, but just even starting this process, going into New York and living in the homeless shelter, that alone was 5.5 years, living in a room, living where people were on drugs and HIV and hepatitis. Somebody shooting at my window in Brooklyn, because I was in the hood, and people attempted rape issues, while I was in Brooklyn as well. And then going into medical school where you're one of 10, um, and you're the only one. And there's a perception, in this country that, you're not as smart. You have to try harder, do more, stay up later, do more research. And even when I was in college, it was an interesting situation when I realized there was actually a differences between the Caucasian and the Afro-American. Is when my friend and I, who was Caucasian, we did the same exact paper, and she got a 10 or an A, and I got a B. Same exact paper, we worked together on it at home. So I knew there was something different. I couldn't understand, why there was a difference in the grades when we had the exact same thing on the same paper. Of course, the professor did not know that we actually worked on it together, and we just left it alone. Or I left it alone because I understood what it was at that time. I remember when I was in the residency program, even simple things like the way I would wear scrubs. If I wear scrubs, people would stop me in the hallway and tell me to go clean the rooms or empty the commode. I thought I looked like a doctor. I was wearing scrubs like everybody else. So as you know, I do not wear scrubs now every day because I don't want someone taking me as a CNA or as the cleaning person. I always dress the part, and then I actually change into scrubs if I have to do surgery. I always wear my white jacket, my long white jacket, because I don't want them thinking of me of anything else. But the other thing that is happening now recently is people keep asking me if I'm a nurse practitioner. I mean, I've done 14 years. The ID is right there. I should get the respect. So I'm getting that nurse practitioner. Are you really a doctor? In the hallway, in the elevators when I go to the hospital. If sometimes another Afro-American will say, are you a nurse practitioner or are you a doctor? I mean, it's a little uncomfortable, and I would make this joke, I only play one on TV, because it's like, you're so tired of the same question. Of course, coming from Trinidad, I didn't really realize that there was, I wasn't aware that there was a difference, between the different races. I just thought that I can just come here and I can do it all, because where I come from, everybody looks like me. We're doctors and lawyers and, prime ministers. In fact, the prime minister and the president of Trinidad and Tobago is a female as we speak. So I never had that sense until I was actually going through the process. So I knew that there was something there. I knew that I had to work harder, study more. Every night I would do more research. I would go to the library, make sure I do all my pre-rounding studying, because I know they will come after me. And sometimes even getting the question right was the wrong thing to do. So towards the end, I learned to keep my mouth shut. And I just took it because I knew once I was done, I could be who I am, who I truly was at that time. I've been here over 30 years. I feel I've lived in the United States longer than I've lived in my own country. I know I have an accent. It is because I live in two worlds. My parents, my dad is still alive, and my sisters are still in Trinidad, and some family over here as well. But I'm really more American than most people think, because I don't know anybody outside of my family in Trinidad. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, actually has the highest or the most significant culture difference. I really believe that. Because in New York, it's very multicultural. You have a lot of people from the Caribbean, from Jamaica, from Russia, from Peru, and everybody understands it's a melting pot. Even when I was in West Virginia, which was 97% Caucasian, I was more of an oddity, and I was different, so they kind of embraced me. I did not understand that coming down here to the South, a place that is 55%, 50% Afro-American, that there would be such a division. Because I remember when I do my research and I'm looking at a new place to live, I'm looking at it in the book. I'm looking to see how much Afro-Americans, how many people are in the area, what is the weather, what's the school system. it looked very open, it looked very multicultural, at least on the surface. But when you come to the space and you have a Christmas party, or you have a physician Christmas party where there's no Afro Americans invited, or you go to an event where there's no Afro Americans and the two is separated, you feel like, wow, this is really different. Because in New York, I mean, we have one Christmas party, we have one gala. But in here in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, you have a Afro-American or Black gala, and you have a white gala. And the two doesn't seem to mix. I think science is actually the way to go. Engineering is fantastic right now. If you get into the computer industry, you can make a ton of money. Medicine is a great way. We need people to look like ourselves, particularly in areas where, like this area, it's 55% Afro-American, but you walk through the halls of the hospital and you might see maybe 2 of us or 3 of us. Every single room, or maybe about 80% of the hospital beds are filled by Afro-Americans, and you only have 1 or 2 doctors that represent, who look like you. And why is that important? That is important because of empathy. You want to take care of the person that looks like yourself, like your mother, like your sister. Because if that person doesn't look like yourself, they just become a number. They just become like taking care of a dog or a cat or something on the street. So you get more empathy, you have more willpower to do better for that person. That's my sister, that's my mom. I'm going to go back and do my research. I'm going to find if there's another way of making that person better.
Dr. Alice Pendleton's story ranks among the greatest who have encountered hardship and had the courage to defy the odds.
I was born 1949 in El Campo, Texas. And then, we came to Hempstead in 1958. Okay, when I first started college, I went to Prairie View A&M University. My husband encouraged me to go to college. I had graduated in 1967, but I didn't go to college because I just didn't have the motivation to go to college. But he knew of my, he knew how I was, as far as my academic credentials, and so he encouraged me to go ahead and go to college. He said, Alice, because I was cooking and washing dishes, he said, Alice, you're too smart to be doing that, so you need to go to college. And so I went to college and I got my degree in pre-med at Prairie View A&M University. After I got the biology degree in 1976, I wasn't able to find a job. So my husband again encouraged me to go back to Prairie View and get my degree in mechanical engineering. And then when I did, I had job offers flowing everywhere, So that lets you know students should really think about what they're going to major in and what they're going to do when they go to school. My surgery and everything occurred in 1983. I had just graduated from Rice University with my master's in material science, and they discovered a tumor on my pituitary gland. And following the surgery, I had a stroke, and that stroke was really devastating because here I was, a college graduate, had to learn how to walk, had to learn how to talk, crawl, and everything. But God brought me through, and it was just really, it was really amazing that I was able to go through it because it was one of the worst strokes that I'd ever had. But God was able to bring me. And then after that, I went on to work on my PhD at Texas A&M University. And while I was there working at Texas A&M University, that's when I was called to work for NASA. Well, if you're gonna go into science or engineering, you need to get as much math as possible because those are math related fields. And see, with me, I told you I got my first degree and I didn't do that well because I didn't realize at the time that my math was my strong point. Because I knew as a child, math always came easy to me. learning always came easy to me, and I was just able to really, I would tell young people, get as much math as you can, get into some STEM program, take as much algebra, trigonometry as you can to get that background, and that would help you to be able to go into any science or engineering field. While I was working on my PhD at Texas University, the Queen of England, Mike Doobie, and President George Bush called me to come to NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And they called me, and I was disabled at the time, and my husband was my provider. And so initially, I turned it down because I couldn't go without my husband. And so about 30 minutes later, they called me back and they said, Alice, what would it take for you to come, to NASA Goddard? I said, well, one thing, you got to bring my husband. And then about maybe 30 minutes later, they called me, they said, pack your bag. And so that's how we ended up being in NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And that's how I ended becoming one of the hidden figures, because if they had not done that, then it would not have made it possible for me to go in and work for NASA, because they wanted me to work on the research, dealing with the moon and everything like that, because they had this new piece of equipment called the spiral orbit turbometer. I was able to go in, and my husband with me, we went in and we looked at the lubricants, and we had this machine called the spiral orbit turbometer, and he would break down the machine, and I would do the testing on it to find the coefficient of friction, to find the degradation of the material, that it would last the mission, the length of the moon, because the lubricant had to go to the moon, and it had to last the mission of the moon and everything like that, because I enjoyed it, but it was still devastating because I went through the discrimination. I went through discrimination at NASA. And then when I came to peer review, I'm still working at NASA now. I work as a professor, and I also work at peer review, working at NASA. And at this particular time, because I had worked at, in NASA Goddard, they hired me at peer review as a professor and working for NASA. And in this particular research, I had to determine, the astronaut was going to the moon, and they had to be protected from the radiation. And in order to protect it from the radiation, we had to use what they call regular, which is nothing but moon dust. And what I would do in order to develop this material, I would take the regular and mix it with ultra high molecular weight polyethylene into different portion of it to come up with a composite that would protect these astronauts and their equipment when they get ready to go to the moon. I tell you, it was amazing. I went through a lot. It was devastating, but like I still said, I depended on God in spite of it, in spite of what I went through, in spite of what I went through at NASA. I never gave up. I always kept persevering. I don't care what it looked like or what it felt like. I always kept persevering, and I always trusted God, because I knew if I continued to trust God, that He would see me through. And He saw me through. He saw me through, not only through my education, but my work and everything. And even at peer review at the university, they discriminated against me. But God saw me through it. Because since that time, when I left peer review, I was forced to retire. Since that time, I've started a school, Pendleton Chapel Seminary. I'm also in the process of starting a high school diploma for kids that cannot complete their high school diploma. But like I said, God is still using me. Even though I'm in this wheelchair, He's still using me. So I encourage young people, never give up. Never give up on your dream. I don't care if you are disabled. Just trust God, and He will see you through.
The area of science is forever evolving.
I am Earl Dean Joseph. I am 82 years old, and I have been a nurse for many, many years. And the thing that caused me to have an interest in nursing was I was visiting my grandmother in Woodville, Mississippi, and there was this Black lady that was taking care of this family. And the family had a new baby, so that was her duty too, to take care of the new baby. And she was so willing and so carried away with her job So she really made an impression on me. And she had to take care of the mother after she had a prenatal care. She got the flu or one of the other diseases. So she had to double as her nurse. And she was such a loving, caregiving person that she really attracted my attention. And I said, whenever I grow up, I would like to be that kind of companion or nurse or whatever her job description was. Several people that told me that, oh, it's no way that you can be a nurse. You don't have the money to go to school, and all the schools for nurses are out of town, and you just don't have that kind of money, and your parents don't have that kind of money. But I felt, well, sure enough, there must be a way. So this hunger for being a nurse continued to hang and linger in my inner being. Came to the Baton Rouge General in 51. I was one of the first Black nurses that came there. There was a big welcome mat, in a sense, when I started working at Baton Rouge General. Because when I started working at Baton Rouge General, I worked on the polio unit. There was a need for me to work on the polio unit. There, we had no training at all on the polio unit. But the segregation was at its peak on the polio unit because it was federally funded. Segregation was not permitted. One was one was one on the polio unit. So everything worked along quite well until pretty soon the patients with acute polio was soon moved out to their homes to receive to receive rehabilitation from the damages that the polio had rendered them. So new polio patients were non-existent for a while because Dr. Falk had founded a formula that had really wiped polio out. There was no new polio patients coming. And the ones that were there, they were able to migrate home and have physical therapy from their homes. And pretty soon thereafter, this unit was opened up as a diagnostic procedure. And there came another problem because the ones that were there that were admitted for diagnostic purposes were white people because segregation was still at its peak. And as I said earlier, polio had become extinct. So the people that were there were white people. And of course, segregation was at its peak. So there was this little problem, but it soon was eradicated because they learned to respect and realize that Blacks were capable intellectually as well as physically. There was quite a bit of coldness, insults, things like, I never did know they make Black nurses. I said, oh yeah, they make them. They make them. They make them. I can remember my words and my response quite vividly, although it was many years ago. I said, they make them, and we're qualified, we're well trained, and we're capable of taking care of your needs. So let's try and do the best we can with what we have. So from then on, as a rule, there was some togetherness and some harmonious relationship thereafter. But then there would come the other new whites. And this was a totally different thing for them. So they had to express their disbelief and doubt that we were qualified because we were Black, we were inferior. So if we're inferior, we inadequate. These were their words. But pretty soon thereafter, I was transferred to 4 South because the census dropped and the patients that were there for diagnostic procedures began to drop. And I was transferred to the predominantly black unit, where anything you had, any disease you had, you were housed on that unit. So that's when I was transferred to the unit they call 4 South. And on this unit, there was anything that was black, whatever the disease, whether they were communicable, whether it's obstetrical, GYN, or whatever, they were housed on this one unit. And we band ourselves together to do the best we could, we the workers, to make sure that cross-contamination did not occur. So we worked really, really hard and tried to make things better with limited supplies, because the supplies that we had on 4 South, which is a black hospital, were the old supplies that were transferred from the other parts of the hospital. And the other parts of the hospital had new supplies, and we had the leftover supplies. But we, the workers, realized that our patients were at a disadvantage, and we could make a difference to them. So we band ourselves together to make sure that everything was really spotless and clean, and cut down the chance of contamination or the spread of a disease. And we did the best that we could with what we had. The medical facilities were just overly inadequate. We had a room 450, which was designated to the new mamas, and it housed 7 patients. And across the hall was room 451, which housed black male patients. There were no bathrooms or commodes in any of these rooms. The only bathroom was one on the corridor. Best we could do is give them the best that we could give to make their stay a little bit more bearable. With a limited amount of resources, first we give obedience to God, the great head of the church, our supreme creator, that he engineered us and gave us the thoughts and the wherewith to do the best we could with what we had. And by that meant to try and keep sure that after the use of a bedpan, that we would empty it and cleanse it really, really good in the utility room and bring it back for when they would need it again. So our job had to be a God-given job, because we realized that had we not taken over some of these extra chores, cross-contamination was going to be rampant. I give God the credit, because once he has instilled within our hearts and in our minds to do the very best that we can, that these patients will receive the best of care. I'll swing to the big white nursery. It was a unit by itself. I mean, the nursery itself was for the newborn babies. And the floor where the babies were, that was an obstetrical floor. That is where the mamas were housed. But in spite of all of this, and I hate to use this term, but it's reality, an epidemic came about in the predominantly white nursery, and they lost 8 patients. Whereas our patients, I'm not saying that God is biased or prejudiced, but that was reality. And in spite of how the situation was on the Black unit, if a mother was fortunate enough to get a semi-private room, it would not be near the nursery because the nursery was at the rear of the corridor. And that was on 4th floor. And the obstetrical unit was on 3rd floor, right beneath the 4th floor where the 4th floor nursery was. So the little newborn Black babies could just be skedaddled up the steps to the nursery. But if we had an overflow of Black patients, regardless of the condition, if there were no beds, they were housed on the corridor. And if a Black mama was fortunate enough to have a private room or a semi, it was way down the hall from the nursery. But in spite of all these conditions, not one Black baby got sick. And we lost 8 babies in the predominantly white nursery. 8. It's hard to believe. We know that God is not biased. We know He's fair in all His dealings. But it happened. That's history. It did happen.
March 2020, the first known case of the coronavirus was reported in New Orleans.
Hi, my name is Antoinette Kareem, and I'm a PhD doctoral candidate at Tulane University School of Medicine in the Biomedical Science program in New Orleans, Louisiana. I think I've had a passion or a yearning to be involved in STEM from a very young age. At like 5, I wanted to be an OBGYN and a ballerina. I guess one of them didn't really work out. I don't dance anymore. But I always loved the idea of the human body and how it worked and how things worked along with it. So once I finished high school, I decided to go to Xavier because I wanted to be a doctor or a physician, should I say. And there I was able to establish an even greater love of biology and just seeing how STEM can take you places. Seeing all the African American professors and colleagues just be excited about STEM along with me was different. It was refreshing. And it was actually very significant in that you don't see it in the other parts of life. Once I graduated from Xavier, still pretty excited about STEM, I went to Drexel College School of Medicine, and of course there weren't many people that looked like me who were excited about STEM. And then now here at Tulane University School of Medicine, getting my doctoral degree, I am one of the few Black women, and there are no professors that look like me. So it's hard at times to kind of like still have a passion for STEM and not get questioned from the outside, but also on the inside of whether I belong. But I know I belong because I love STEM. I think it's awesome. So while my time here at Tulane in my doctoral program, I am studying viruses, hemorrhagic viruses to be specific, of West Africa. Some of those viruses are Ebola virus and Lassa virus. So I'm looking at viral diagnostics that are used in the field work in countries like Nigeria and Sierra Leone. And I'm also looking at how viral infections cause miscarriages and fetal deaths. I feel like I've created this love for New Orleans since the moment I stepped on Xavier's campus. It's a city filled with so much culture, food, and tradition that I can align with. Being also a Louisianian, my family is of Creole descent, so coming here and learning even more about the Creole culture has been such an enjoyable moment. And I return now at Tulane because I think the city is so beautiful. There's so many diverse groups here. The music, just the air of New Orleans. Even though Bourbon Street can be kind of funky, The air of New Orleans, it just keeps you here. When the pandemic occurred, the kickoff of the pandemic in New Orleans, to be exact, was right after the Mardi Gras festival. As you know, we have festivals every month, but Mardi Gras is the biggest every year. It brings thousands of people into one small area, drinking and having fun, and breathing that same air all over, right? So about 2 weeks after Mardi Gras occurred, we saw the biggest influx of cases. In March, at the end of March, we saw the highest case number for the whole of this pandemic to date, 875 cases at the end of March, and 32 deaths also in the same month at the end of March, the highest number per day. I think many people were upset later on that we had Mardi Gras here in New Orleans, and kind of pointed fingers at different people as to why we would allow such an event, knowing that we possibly had a pandemic, knowing that the global pandemic was somewhere on its way, but we weren't sure where it was. It's invisible, right? I think the national leadership could have took a bigger stance in protecting its citizens and isolating our country, shutting down all cities, and shutting down domestic travel earlier. We had suspicion as scientists of COVID-19 coming from China and transmitting across the world through international travel in the fall of 2019. There were some cases even here in New Orleans at Tulane Hospital of patients having this unknown lung issue, but it wasn't pneumonia and it wasn't the flu, but we just didn't know what it was. And numbers are still kind of up in the air about the fall COVID-19 patients and what really happened. So everybody was just in a quizzitive state at the time, and because our national leadership hadn't created a full national mandate of stopping travel, stopping any large events, Mardi Gras went on as it does every year. Unfortunately, we saw the consequences 2 weeks later with our influx of cases and deaths, but no one's to blame. Once those cases came in that same week, Mayor LaToya Cantrell shut down the city way earlier, before most other parishes and larger cities in New Orleans. And she has been very adamant about keeping her citizens safe. I mean, no one's perfect, but she's tried. In the context of COVID-19, we have seen different studies state that African Americans all over the country have been hit the most with COVID cases and also COVID deaths. A Ochsner general practitioner, Dr. Ebony Price Haywood, actually did a study in May of about 3,000 patients who came into the Ochsner system and were labeled as COVID-19 patients, that 70% of those who died were actually African American. And that is in May, which was 2 months after the pandemic really hit New Orleans. In June of 2020, the New Orleans City Coroner's Office put out a report stating that African Americans or Black identifying citizens of Orleans Parish had the highest numbers of deaths from COVID-19 in every age group from 30 to 85 plus. And recently, to date, December 18th, the Department of Health of Louisiana and the New Orleans City Health Department have stated that at 73% of COVID-19 deaths have been African American or Black identifying citizens of New Orleans. So that's 486 deaths out of 662 have been Black people. We understand that this can be from a myriad of reasons. People here in New Orleans that are considered African Americans or Black identifying, a lot of them are essential workers or frontline workers working in hospitals, the hospitality sectors, even working in retail. And these people may not actually have the social economic means to have quarantined for the last 6 months. So if they are out there working as these essential workers, are there to work as grocery store workers, they're confronting the virus every day. And last but not least, we understand that with poverty and social economic disparities, you have healthcare racism. And this can be seen in every city. But this is, again, a majority African American or people of color city. And many doctors do not look like us. So those are the main reasons why we saw such a very high stake, along with African Americans being a part of a group that have the high risk underlying diseases like asthma, hypertension, and obesity that this virus seems to people to succumb to. Luckily, we have somebody in the NIH, Dr. Kizzy Colbert, who is a leading scientist for SARS-CoV-2 research. So gathering more African Americans, people of color in these spaces as scientists and doctors, it allows trust to be built in these populations. Now, the idea of a vaccine that's rapidly approaching, hopefully people can get a better understanding of what's in the vaccine so they can feel reassured. But that takes the scientists, doctors, and other people that know what's going on to better explain that this vaccine is needed, especially for the high-risk populations with underlying diseases and for those who were hit the hardest, the African-American communities. If I could speak to a young woman who has a passion for STEM, I would tell her just never stop. I think a lot of times people put STEM in connection with men or people that don't look like us. But why does it matter? Who can tell you no? Like, you have the power to be whatever you want. Our ancestors have pushed and toiled for you to be here. If you love it, go after it, especially in STEM. To my fellow sisters in science, thank you for being here. Thank you for sometimes being the only one here. Thank you for continuing your work. Thank you for going back and picking up new friends, new family, new sisters that look just like you. I appreciate you, and I'm so thankful to share in our journey to uncovering STEM as a Black woman, as a woman of color, as a leader in our community.
I'm Gwendolyn Miller. Was born and reared in Tuskegee, Alabama. Lived with parents that were in the medical field. So I guess that had a lot to do with my choosing to be a registered nurse. Yes, I did grow up in a family. My uncle was a pharmacist. My aunt was a registered nurse and often talked about the medical field. So from a very young girl, I guess I was more or less introduced into how important it was to become a registered nurse. And I can always remember, she said, when you get ready to go to school, you cannot go to a school that has the program for just the degree program. You must go to a BSN school. So that was kind of instilled in me at a very young age. And I think the reason for that was that at the time that she went to nursing school, they only had certain programs where nurses could only get their degree, but not their BSN. So she told me at a very young age, do not look at any of those schools, because when you go to school, you have to choose an accredited college that will provide you with a BSN. So it was from learning experience. At Tulane University, I was in nursing 4 years and 3 summers. And then I came back to Baton Rouge, and that's when I was employed. Here, my first job in Baton Rouge was at the Baton Rouge General Hospital. Very interesting, very different. When I was hired here at Baton Rouge General, at that time, the only place Afro-American nurses or Black nurses were hired was on one unit, which was called Force South. I don't know of any nurses that were hired, regardless to your degree or your qualifications, at any place except Force South, which was a different unit. In fact, I have to smile because I can remember working Force South. It's the only unit that a Black could be admitted, and we were, regardless of their medical condition. All other hospitals were patients, regardless of their color, were placed on a unit. I mean, I don't remember, except the only one I remember was the Lane Memorial in Lake Charles, where Black nurses only worked in surgery. But as far as a patient beds, I think they were placed on any unit. But this hospital was different. Like I said, if you were Black, Afro-American person, you were only assigned to 4 South. If there were no beds on 4 South, then you were placed in the hall with a screen around you. We had our nursery here at 4 South. At the end of 4 South was the nursery, where our babies were delivered downstairs, but we had to go down the steps and receive the babies into the nursery from the back. We had, as I indicated, OBGYN, we had surgery, we had orthopedics, you named it. We were a unit within itself. When I first was employed at Baton Rouge General Hospital, I worked as a registered nurse on the floor. After 2 years, I was promoted to another unit, which was 4 East, which was predominantly at that time whites, but I think they were beginning to integrate at that time, if I remember correctly. And I was promoted to head nurse on 4 East. And some of the interesting things that I observed back in that day was that being head nurse was unusual for a Black nurse to have that position. Many times, I have to sit back and smile now I think about it. The patients, not particular patients, but their relatives would go to one of the white nurses who was an LPN. And I would just sit back and look and watch it. And eventually she'd say, well, no, you'll have to check with Mrs. Miller. I mean, what a shock. Yeah. I mean, they were not used to a Black nurse being in charge of a unit. So those were some of the things that I observed as the charge nurse. It was very interesting. I just sat on the white side of the cafeteria. At this time, there was a little window there where Black people had to go and order their meals, order their tray. We could not sit in the cafeteria or go through the line and choose. You had to tell them what you want. And then there was a very small area that Blacks were allowed to sit in. So I said, fine. So that particular day I went to dinner and I sat on the white side and I went through the line. And of course the eyes were on me. And I guess I managed to keep my dinner down. But anyway, everything worked good. Everybody looked at me and they did not say a word. I went through just like the whites and got down and sat down on the white side of the cafeteria. So later that day, when I returned to the unit, one of the directors over the hospital, I think it was Dr. Simon, Mr. Simon, I can't remember, came up to me and I said, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my job. He's gonna give me a pink slip, because at that time they would call them pink slips. I said, they told him I sat on the white side of the cafeteria and he's come up to tell me I'm gonna have to find another job. My heart started beating fast. He came up, he says, Mrs. Miller, how's your day going? Oh boy, did I sigh with a sigh of relief, because he did not even address the issue that I had sat on the white side of the cafeteria. The next day, the wall was torn down between the cafeteria. So the nurses have always teased me. They said, you were the one that caused us to be able to eat with the whites. And there was very little said about it. They started tearing the wall down and the cafeteria became one big unit for both Blacks and whites. When I saw the construction, I felt very good. And I felt that, me sitting over there along with another Black RN really made a difference. And we felt very good about it. And, we felt that we were human too, and it was only fair that we be treated the way we were. Well, my advice to them would be, if you're really interested in the profession, please be dedicated. Please take care of your patients. These patients are sick and they need you. And I will say, I have visited hospitals, and with this new generation, I have some real big concerns. And I don't know exactly how to express that, but I think if you go into the field of nursing or field of medicine, it is something that you need to take seriously. And I will share this with you. I had a son who was in the hospital, and I was not really happy with his care that he was getting. And I said to one of the nurses one day, I said, you know what? I'm wondering, when the doctors and some of your nurses took their oath, if they did not have their eyes closed. And surprisingly enough, she agreed with me. She says, Miss Miller, I understand. So apparently there are some things that I don't think that they're taking as serious as I feel like they should. And I think when you take that oath, I think it should mean something. And I think you should really mean it and feel it. Now, I don't want to be ugly, but I just don't feel that people are as serious as they were back in the day. I don't think Baton Rouge General was an exception, but to me, when I was employed, and at that time, they were only employing Black nurses on 4 South, where you had Black patients. And I just think it was just a policy. Now, I didn't work anywhere else. Maybe later in my life, I may have worked at Our Lady of the Lake, but at that time, everything had changed. Now, I found out, like I said, in Lake Charles, working at I think it was predominantly, was a Catholic hospital. I found it a little bit different from Lane Memorial, which, like I told you, only hired Black nurses in the surgery department. But when I went to the other hospital, I was placed on the regular unit. There was no restriction. At that time, I remembered having to work, and many times I would never get off. I worked the 3 to 11 shift, and I was 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock getting off because we could not complete everything within the course of that time, but never got any overtime. Never really thought about it.
As a science teacher, Katherine Michele Sanders is the bridge to our next generation of African American scientists.
As far back as I can remember, I would spend my Sundays at my grandmother's house in the library with the National Geographic magazines, the encyclopedia, and I just would scan from front to back. I knew that's where my passion was. I knew that's where, just to me, all the answers were in sciences somewhere. All my wonders led to discoveries, and from, I guess, childhood, I thought I was going to be a veterinarian, and along the way that changed, but yes, I always knew I'd be in the sciences somewhere. Katherine Johnson of the movie Hidden Figures, and I say of the movie Hidden Figures, but she is a phenomenal woman in her own right, with or without the movie. She was a mathematician and a mathematician at NASA. She mapped the trajectory for the space shuttle to orbit the Earth, as well as to go to the moon and return. And of course, through the movie, you'll see that that's one of the key parts of the whole trajectory, is that you land back at the right spot at the right time. My grandmother, I say a phenomenal woman because whether she was related to me or not, I must say she's one of the best human beings I've ever met. Her soul is a very compassionate soul, and her intellect spans your Englishes, your sciences, your social studies. I cannot remember a question that I've ever asked her that she didn't know the answer to. And I'm still amazed at all that she has held in that almost 100-year-old brain. She loved learning, and I guess learning is a lot about observing, wanting to know the answers. And when you go searching for the answers, that's, when your intellect starts to build. And she says that from the very beginning, she loved learning and she always wanted to know why. Absolutely inspired me to know that I could do anything I wanted to do. Now, she always knew that I had life science and earth science were just, that's where my passion lied. She did all she could to keep me busy in the yard, learning about plants. I have another grandmother who was more of an animal person, so that's where the life science came in. The influence from my grandmother was, you can do anything you set your mind to. And she always said, have fun. At the end of every discussion, conversation, you can do anything you want to do and have fun. In my teaching experience and watching my students come in and then to see how they end up after a year and then your 3 years in middle school, I do believe that exposure has a lot to do with it. They're exposed to English through media, through reading and writing, but your sciences kind of are scary for some people because it's not something they're familiar with in the home. They're not exposed to it with their peer groups. So that's what I come to find is the fact that they're not exposed. Today's students, I see that the girls seem to grasp it faster and they embrace it. They want to know more. They're more engaged. I feel that the reason that the area is so male dominated is because men were allowed to study and to go on and they got the jobs. I don't think that women were ever not interested. They just seemed to follow what society thought was their place. And believe it or not, there's a science in the household, the cooking, the cleaning, the just the whole caring of a family is science. You've got them being nurses and coming up with products to use. So we were always busy in the sciences. We just weren't given the opportunity to make ourselves known. In my classrooms currently, I must say that my girls are outproducing my boys. I would say that the first thing we talked about, that the field was dominated by men and the women were suppressed, that was the beginning. And that may have led us to feel that we couldn't, or maybe I don't have all that it takes, or he seems to be doing it better, that we second guessed ourselves. And back to what I was saying about the children, the exposure. We didn't see the women in those positions, and not necessarily at home had anyone to push us and guide us and lift us up to say, oh yes, I can. Exactly. Not everybody had a Katherine Johnson grandmother. And so that's what I would say about that. The encouragement in middle school and high school is helping them to find the excitement. Children today want to be stimulated. They're not so pushed by dollars. They're not so pushed about their building a retirement or looking forward to the house, the picket fence, and 2 cars. They want to be engaged and excited along with whatever work they find. So that's what I try to do, is to help them find something interesting, something that they enjoy.
In 6th grade, I did a project on Katherine Johnson. And ever since then, I've looked into the medical field. I've even watched Hidden Figures. And I've thought about becoming a pediatrician or thinking about how I could incorporate math and science, since I like both of them.
And then try to tie in some type of career and talk about the lifestyle that you want when you're 40 or when you're 50. And that this might be the avenue versus that profession. But truly, the opening of the doors, the engaging, and the aha moments are the ones that we hope to capture. That'll be the catalyst to push them in a science direction.
Actually, a lot of people have told me that in the medical field, people get discouraged by the color of their skin or their gender or their age sometimes or their experience. So I think that I might feel a bit discouraged at first, but I know that I'll be able to do it.
My name is Anna Katherine Jackson. I am the oldest of 7 children. 3 girls, 4 boys. I have a brother that expired and also a sister. It was a challenge. It was a challenge that some friends of mine were saying I could not take the test because at the time I had not graduated from high school. I married at an early age. But Lord and behold, I took the test and I came up as number 12 or 60 some applicants. I took the test and then I had to meet with some representatives from Baton Rouge General Hospital that was administering the test at the time to become a licensed practical nurse. So I passed, I went to school, and at the time I had 3 children. So it was a challenge to even continue going to school and being a housewife and a mother. I came to Baton Rouge General in June of 1959. They hired me on the 4th floor. A nurse of Mrs. Ida Henderson was a great help to me. She would call and tell me that they were hiring and to put my name on the list to be hired. And she told me to do it every week, come back every week and fill out an application. So my application would be on top. And that is how I got hired at Baton Rouge General to work on the 4th floor south. Oh, some of the rewards were so great. It was being able to help people, to see them get well, and then would come back and tell you thank you. The rewards of just being able to relieve somebody's pain. They may ring a bell and say they were hurting, and you would have medication at your disposal that you can go and help relieve their pain. The rewards of seeing people, as I say, go about their daily lives, young babies and all, to see them become grown children. And all of this, they can come back and tell you that you were their nurse and thank you for helping them. The rewards of knowing that the gift, I consider it was a gift, because even though I studied and was prepared, there was something within me that just made me want to help people, to serve people. And not only at the hospital, but outside of the hospital, being a good neighbor. A neighbor may call on you to come help or to ask a question. I was among the first. There was several that was here before me, but I was one of the first to be there when they started the segregation, the integrating of patients. I would say to them to put in your application. Don't put down everything you know, because you will be used to do some of that, even though it might not be in your resume. Put down the basics and to come and to give it your all. Be willing to work weekends and holidays. Be willing to be away from your family on some of those special days that you would love to be with them, because you are an essential personnel and you would have to be on the job many times that you might want to be at home. Oh, this has been, I know, 20 or 30 years since I've been back here. And it's completely different. It's modern. I didn't recognize it when I walked off the elevator, but it feels good to be back here to know some of the experiences that have gone on during that time.
The Race to Space is a mission filled with heroes and legends.
I'm Dr. Renee Horton, and I am the founder of Unapologetically Being, a mentoring group for changing the face of STEM. So how do we change the face of STEM? We change the face of STEM by showing others that all of us can do STEM. So when I was younger, I Googled scientists, and of course a white male came up in a white shirt with a pocket protector or with a white lab coat on. And I knew right then I didn't look like them. And so it became my goal to want to change what the face of STEM looks like. When I was 17 years old, I wanted to be an Air Force pilot, and I had gone to take my physical for the Air Force. And I found out that day that I was actually hearing disabled. And it kind of rocked my world because I didn't know anything else at that point. I had been focusing on joining the Air Force, becoming a pilot, and becoming an astronaut. And my whole life changed that day. I watched them mark a big red X on my paper, and I realized right then that I was being rejected from my dream, rejected from the things that I really wanted in life. After learning that I had a hearing disability called a cookie cutter bite, the interesting thing about it is that the highs and lows I could hear just fine, but it's the range in speech that I could not. And so for those who spoke English as a second language, they were the most difficult for me. Being here in Louisiana, Cajun is our second language, but I could understand that for most parts. But when going back to college, it was the LSU Hearing and Speech Foundation that taught me how to address my disability and how to accept it and own it and to be able to move forward. They believed in me, but it was people close to me that didn't think that I could really go back to school with the disability and the 3 kids and actually achieve half of what I've achieved today. I finished my degree at the University of Alabama. I became the first African American to receive my degree in that area. And one of the things I constantly noticed was that most of the time I may be the only Black in the room, the only Black woman in the room, the only woman in the room sometimes. And that led me to want to form Unapologetically Being Incorporated, which is my nonprofit that deals with mentoring in STEM. We believe that if you want to survive, it's one thing, but if you want to thrive in STEM, then you do that with others who have already walked through those halls before you with mentoring. So we are a heavily formulated mentoring nonprofit based on the fact that we have already been through those halls. I often wonder who says you can't. There are so many people saying that we can't. And as Blacks and those of us that are in STEM, we know that you can. It may be hard, there may be plenty of doors that are closed on you, but we know that you can. I'm an engineer right here at the NASA Michele Assembly Facility in New Orleans, Louisiana. This is my home away from home, originally from Baton Rouge, and this is where I live now. And what I do know is living in New Orleans and being able to do something that I absolutely love doing, being in STEM, being able to do engineering, being able to build rockets makes me extremely happy and extremely proud that I'm from Louisiana. As a child, I dreamed of being an astronaut. I dreamed of working for NASA. My road was not straight and narrow. It made a complete circle. And I came full circle in life at 39, about to turn 40. And I got my job at NASA after I turned 40. I want you to understand that regardless of what your dreams are and what doors are open or what doors are closed, you can still have your dream. There is nothing wrong with not going the straight way. A lot of times we want to push our kids straight into college and they're not ready for it or they're not mentally prepared for it. So be mindful that it's not always the way to go. But having those in your network and those supporting you, you can definitely still get to where you want to go. I'm one of the most recognizable faces for Michele Assembly Facility, and I'm okay with that today simply because it lets everybody else know that a dream deferred isn't a dream burned out.
Every day that we wake, we have to deal with life. Every day that the sun shines makes us feel alright. When the rain comes, it rains on us all. And we know when life's rain must fall. But I just want to know how these life seasons flow. I just want to know which way they should go. The earth has seasons and so do life. Some are good seasons and some through strife. Spring, summer, winter, and then comes the fall. Same as the seasons, they mirror us all. I should have been a billionaire. I really hope I can change this world, but my reality remains the same. And I'm aware that my seasons will change. The seasons of life.